It's 9:30. I think we can get going.
Right.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. We have a big room and only a few people. I would really appreciate it if you come closer. Even if you're planning to leave halfway through, it's still better to have us nearby.
Because we can barely see you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Starting with the note well, it's Friday, you've seen it before. Still, the note well applies, and so does the code of conduct. Please be respectful of one another. Next slide. You have them, right? Yeah. Yes, our agenda for today. A few words on document status, and then Justin will lead the discussion about the resource server draft, which is the one major document that we have outstanding, and then any other business. Next. So our core protocol is right now in Roman's queue. Roman.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I haven't even had a chance to log in and put myself in the queue. Thanks. Yeah, I have seen the publication request. It was very exciting kind of when it popped up. So, wow, like it's been so much kind of work to do that. To set everyone's expectations, I have a couple of other very large documents kind of ahead of it. So I don't know whether I'll be able to even get to in August. Best case, it would be very kind of late August with kind of some other things kind of happening. So again, I'm very excited. I'm not ignoring it. I see it. I got some big documents ahead of it.
Thank you, Roman. The ARAS protocol, the ARAS part of the protocol is still in the working group. We will discuss some of the remaining issues. There is a large number of issues open. Justin assures me only 3 of them are significant. So we'll be talking about them and plan for working group last call. Any comments? All right. Justin, you're next.
So I can get the controls. Yep, I got them. All right. Hello, everybody. Since we last met, we've gone through 2 revisions of the core, and as was mentioned, it is now sent off to IESG for review, so it's in Roman's hands. We haven't had any new revisions of the RS draft, but there's been a little bit of work in the background starting to look at how we can actually finish that up. And so that's what I'm going to go through. So as per usual, the diffs are in the slides, and you can look through the issues if you want to. The main changes on the draft were a lot of editorial cleanup. So a lot of stuff fixing the IDNets, fixing the IANA registration, requirements for designated experts and all of this other stuff. Although considering what I've just gone through with HTTP signatures, we're probably going to tweak that a little bit after Roman's review. We're a team. We're a team. We absolutely are a team. And as I've mentioned on some lists recently, every single time I do an RFC, I learn something new about IANA that I didn't know before. Yeah, Roman says me too. All right. And a lot of it was, a lot of the editorial stuff was clarification of things like user-facing parameters. Yaron had some good issues about, ASCII characters and processing of, non-ASCII and stuff like that. So that's all clarified in that. The biggest one, though, is the token management API endpoint. Now, previously, we had this kind of a kind of a weird but optimized part of the protocol, where in order to call the token management API endpoint, you applied the token that you were managing to the request as an access token. It was not passed in as part of the call. But this could be very strange, because if you were doing, say, a token value rotation, your token could have been expired. And so your AS would have had to know that this token is expired, but it's actually okay because it's calling this particular endpoint. So actually let it through because I'm about to renew it, and all of this stuff like that. We got feedback from a couple of different implementers saying that was really weird with how they had implemented things, because a lot of people are implementing sort of the GNAT management stuff by reusing RS processing. So there's a middle layer that does the token processing, and then it hands it over to the AS for the actual AS functions, which makes a lot of sense and is actually the entire reason that we built it this way, is to allow for that kind of reuse. So we took a step back here and took a look at the token management API and said, you know what, we're going to make this in parallel with the grant continuation endpoint, and it's going to have its own token management access token for managing tokens. That's a mouthful, but it basically is analogous to the continuation access token for calling the continuation endpoint. It's always bound to the client key. It is never a bearer token, so we were able to get away from some of the problems with bearer tokens when you're doing these high security functions. And that was really the main change. So instead of passing in the token that you're managing, you're calling a resource in the HTTP sense. So it's got a URI and it's got the access token bound to it. And from that resource, the AS figures out which token you're talking about and pulls whatever action that it needs to on that token, whether it's rotating the value, refreshing the expiration, revoking it. All of the functions of token management are now handled that way. This should make it easier for clients, and it will definitely make it easier for authorization servers to implement this piece. This is, of course, an optional part of the protocol. You don't have to offer token management to clients when you issue an access token. And in a lot of cases, people aren't offering token management, which is why this only really came up during the last call. It was kind of a slightly dusty corner. So those changes are in. They were brought up on the list. There was a GitHub issue discussion and pull request. That's all merged in, and that's all part of the draft that is now forward. And that's it for core. I want to stop for a sec to see if there are any questions or comments on core before we move on. All right, I am really excited that core is moving forward. It's been a lot of work getting here. I think that we've done a lot of good stuff with this, and I'm excited to see that go forward. Now on to the RS draft. Those of you that were here from the beginning of the working group may remember that a long time ago we factored out a bunch of stuff from core that was specifically facing the relationship between the resource servers and the authorization servers. So this is things like how you map to a structured token like a JOT, how you declare token formats, because only the RS cares about that, the client doesn't care about that, and how you do token introspection, token validation, and those kinds of things. So all of that is in the RS draft. What we've done in the last few months is we have now extended the discussion of the abstract token model, that is in the RS draft. And this is not a token format like JOT, but this is basically saying that when you get a GNAP token, these are the kinds of things that it represents. So there's the party that approved it, the resource owner. There's the client it was issued to. There's the resource servers that it is applicable at. Now, all of these have places to be expressed within the GNAP protocol itself, but we felt it was also important at this level to be able to say everybody should have sort of a core set of things that you expect to have in a token when you're building out a system that you want to be interoperable at this level, even if you're expressing them in different ways. So the goal with this draft is to have mappings to JOT, mappings to introspection, and definitions of introspection all inside of this. Our goal with the RS draft is to process the remaining issues, and in a minute we're going to go through a couple of those issues with major topics today. And that's pretty much this presentation. So we're going to jump to the issue tracker in a sec. The core is in IETF review, AD review, whatever the right term is. Was that? Publication requested, thank you. And Fabian and I, so Fabian couldn't join us today, unfortunately. He had a family conflict. Fabian and I think that we can get the RS draft at least 2 working group last call ahead of IETF 18. It's a much simpler document. It's already had a bunch of work done to it, and we think that for most of the issues in the tracker, there's a pretty clear direction on where we can go and bring those changes back to the group. There's a couple pieces that we wanted to talk about today, though, and probably have a little bit more discussion on the tracker and on the list. So that's what I had, and I think that we can go to the tracker unless there are more questions.
I apologize. A question to core before we move on. For the token management tokens, do we have a clear cryptographic separation between the token management tokens and regular access tokens?
Yeah, so they have the same restrictions to them that the continuation access token does. So they're not allowed to be used to access other resource servers. They're not allowed to be used to access the continuation endpoint or anything else. I don't know if you would call that a cryptographic separation.
So cryptographic separation is typically something that's inside the token. You can have a type, or you can have some other field to distinguish between different types of tokens.
So all right, so that's actually a key part of the token model that I was just talking about. That's actually in the RS draft, because that is something that the client doesn't actually need to know about, because the client gets these tokens in different parts of the protocol. So for the client, they're pretty well separated. It's the AS and RS that need to enforce this separation, and so that's part of the token model. So we already have a section in the RS draft that talks about the continuation access token as a particular class of token, and we need to add text for the token management tokens.
Okay, it's kind of funny for the security of the AS to depend on security guarantees in the other draft, but
so
fine for now.
It's fundamentally it's an implementation detail, and we already have discussion and I think a security considerations section about separating those tokens.
Okay.
But it is already a requirement in the core draft. The RS draft is just going to go into more detail about how exactly you would want to do that, which is the right place to discuss that, because again, that part's not client facing.
I will show.
Okay.
Yes. But, okay. All the slots for, so you need to something.
You need to unshare the deck.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So. Yes, I do. I'm sorry.
It says you're sharing.
Yeah. No, yeah, Mac.
Oh, is it a permissions
stuff.
thing? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so you can follow along at home with the GitHub issue tracker. That's all that we're pulling up right now. We will get there. We will get there, but it is the IETF GNAP-WG GitHub organization, and this is the GNAP resource servers repository we're going to be looking into. Yeah, link is in the notes. Thanks.
I apologize. Yeah. Okay, try again. Hooray.
Excellent. All right. So as Yaron said earlier, we've got 17 open issues. A lot of these are sort of, general clarity issues that Fabian and I read through, and it's pretty clear like we just need to, go expand the introduction or go clarify this point or something like that. We just haven't done the editorial, work to crank through these. There are a couple of ones here that I think do deserve, wider discussion in the list. So the first of these is number 52, RS revoking access tokens. So this was originally a comment from Andre on a different issue, and the question is, should we allow the RS to manage tokens? So the RS is being presented an access token, and the argument here is that the RS could discover that something is fishy about that, and it should have a way to signal the AS that, hey, something weird happened and I don't trust this access token value. Now, the general sentiment of the discussion that's already on the tracker, this is all going back over a year now. The general sentiment of the thread on the tracker is that we don't want to give the RS sort of, direct access to manage the token. So we don't want to give it the same, just hand it the client's token management endpoint in the same way. However, having an ability for the RS to signal the AS that, hey, something might be fishy with this and you might want to do something with it, that does seem like it would be a useful feature to the overall security of the system, right? So there's a lot of text to read through on that thread, a bunch of comments there. My current stance as an editor is that this is kind of a late-breaking feature that seems like this would be nice to have if we could. And there's not really a strong pull from it from implementers. So to me, this is something that would clearly get binned into an extension of some type, sort of a new function that would be exposed to resource servers by an extension to GNAP RS, and not something that we would try to add to the draft, especially this late in the process. That is my take on it, but we would like to hear what folks think about this feature, if there's any feedback. If there's not feedback, we're just going to close it without action.
Personal opinion, no. As a chair, no, it's not too late in the process. Personal opinion, I totally agree with you. This is a nice to have extension kind of thing. Out of scope for now.
Microphone.
Can we still get to it with extensibility later?
Yeah, yeah, we definitely could. That is something that Fabian and I need to really work on the RS draft. We did a lot of work to be clear about the extensibility points in the core draft. We haven't done that with the RS draft yet. So that is something that if we do table this as no action, then we would want to make sure that there's kind of a clear natural place where this type of function would fit in. To me, it feels like this is something that's kind of parallel to offering introspection, right? Because that's getting the status of a token. This would be something that would be affecting the status of a token. So it's sort of write-only introspection. I don't know.
Actually, I'm not sure you even need to. It would be nice if we had an extension point for this, but not necessarily, in my opinion, because I think the workflow for revocation coming from the RS side is different, and it could be implemented totally on the application level with whatever tools you have.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll confirm this on the list, but it seems like we will probably close this one with no action to the text. All right. Where's the one with symmetric keys? Oh, number 47, please. So this is another one that goes back a while, and it's referencing text that's been updated a little bit, but is still there. So the AS is allowed to issue a key alongside an access token, basically assign a key that the client can use. This key is passed by value in most cases. And so the question is, on introspection, ultimately, how do we handle keys like this and getting that information to the resource server, in particular when it's a symmetric key? So asymmetric keys, it's pretty simple. You send the public key and it's not really a big deal. Symmetric keys, every other place in the protocol, you're not allowed to send a symmetric key by value. You're only allowed to send by reference. So introspection should be able to return a key reference, no problem. The question here is, should we specifically restrict sending symmetric keys by value in an introspection response? To me, speaking as an individual, to me, this restriction makes a lot of sense, because you're basically you're telling implementers that if you're going to use symmetric crypto, you don't get a free key distribution mechanism that kind of, you know, kicks out all of the security from underneath you, because all of the main controls around security of symmetric crypto are around key distribution, right? Whoever has the key can use the key. That's the whole point. And this still would allow introspection to return a key identifier or other derivation handle type of thing if you have some proprietary derivation thing, like Amazon is for AWS. They've got their own process for that. You could still return that type of information as a key identifier, but you would not be allowed to return the symmetric key value in the response. That's kind of where I personally think we should go. We don't have explicit text about this. The introspection section needs to get beefed up a fair amount anyway. But this was a restriction we were thinking of putting it in here. So any thoughts, comments, or feedback on that one? Okay, we will confirm on the list, and if there's no objection, that's the direction we are, the editors are going to plan to take with that one. And please, everybody, feel free to chime in on the GitHub issues, read through the history of the comments. Some of these go back a couple of years old now, but you know, we're finally getting to shake all the dust out here. And finally, I believe it is number 56, the top one. If this is the one that has the graph. Yes, it is. Okay. So yeah, this is based on Florian's thesis work. Oh yeah, they put like flowcharts and, or sequence diagrams and everything like that.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of analysis here. What it boils down to, and I'm going to try to summarize this. What this largely boils down to is that an attacker, if they're able to convince somebody to use their own AS, then they could basically issue their own access token to get the attacker's resources associated with the victim's client in session.
Say again?
Yeah. It's one of those attacks that there's a lot of preconditions to it, but it's important to look into those. But basically, it's a kind of an esoteric token substitution attack where the attacker hands their own token to an unsuspecting user, and then the user goes and uses that at a real RS, and then that the RS is none the wiser because it's a valid token that was originally issued from a real AS. So this only really works with bearer tokens, because if you're doing key-bound tokens, then the attacker can't do the key substitution to the client in the same way. It only works if the attacker is able to convince the client to talk to the wrong AS in the first place, which is valid in a lot of cold boot scenarios. Less common because for the most part, the binding between RS and AS is relatively fixed from the client's perspective in practice, but could happen. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing introspection or not in this case, because the token itself is an actual issued token from the real AS. So introspection doesn't save you here because it's a valid token that's actually being passed through. So I'm not sure what we can do about this attack. Having read through this again this morning, I'm not sure what we can do about this attack beyond warn people, because ultimately
They're not proposing a solution?
They're proposing a solution that you basically pass along a pointer to the AS with the access token. So the client says, I got this token from this AS, and therefore, that's where the RS does the introspection and does the validation. One of the problems with that is that if you are set up in a multi-AS environment and you start to actually depend on that at the RS level, then the attacker's AS would be able to answer that introspection call, and therefore would actually be able to do whatever they want with the RS, because the RS would believe whatever the attacker's AS came back with, which is kind of worse. So I don't think that their mitigation actually mitigates anything. It complicates the protocol and requires the client to pass information, additional information that could itself be substituted. Granted, that's another attack surface you would have to crack, but it could in fact be substituted or proxied. So there's a lot of text there. I'm not looking for people to necessarily digest this all right now. My instinct is that we need to add security considerations and describe this flow. It's based on Florian's work that we had already incorporated a couple of considerations and discussions in the main core document, sort of describing what the problems were that his formal model found and how to avoid those problems. I think we can do the same thing here. And a lot of it boils down to the RS needs to know which AS it's supposed to talk to, which kind of does anyway. But it also emphasizes the importance of a tight binding between the AS and RS from the client's perspective. And so if the client is getting that information from a source other than the RS, then the client has to trust that source. We have similar AS mix-up attacks in OAuth that are largely amount to don't do that. It's much worse in OAuth because of the prevalence of client secrets and bearer tokens everywhere. Here, a lot of the sharp edges are mitigated by key binding all of the requests, the token requests, and all the client requests. So it's less of a wide open problem. But the underlying pattern is still there, and if enough things go wrong, you can find yourself in this weird state that you would not expect to be. So it's to me, this reads like one of those. It is technically a problem. I'm not sure exactly how we would reach it in the real world, quite honestly, but I think it's worth, at the very least, calling out in a discussion, and seeing the best way to address that. There's a lot of text in this thread. Please read it. Fabian and I have not discussed what exactly we're going to do with this yet, but that was the last big one. Any thoughts on this attack? Has anybody had a chance to actually read this?
Dave.
Just curious. I'm hello. Is this even on? It is. Okay. These are the jokes, folks. This is Dave Robin. I'm curious, and I'm not an expert on GNAP, so I'm just here to learn. But you mentioned the RS. How does the client know which AS is served by the RS? I mean, I just watched the Aaron and Mike Jones put together their thing for over an OAuth about www Authenticate, giving you the hint. It's the equivalent of the ACE hint, saying here's who to go talk to, or you read my well-known and you can find out who to go talk to. So in GNAP, is there some equivalent way that I, as a client, can go to an RS and find out your AS so I can talk to the right person, not based on some other knowledge of where my AS is, and then therefore avoid this idea of talking to an evil AS?
Yes. So the www Authenticate response is built into GNAP Core. It is optional for an RS to implement, because not all APIs are necessarily going to have that level of discovery. But the equivalent function is there.
Okay. Well, doesn't that, if that were more mandatory to pay attention to, then wouldn't, or
yeah, so
this idea of I want to talk to the right AS, that's the fundamental problem here. I don't want to be redirected somewhere else.
Yeah, it's fundamentally a discovery problem at the root of it. Much like all of the mix-up attacks in OAuth are discovery problems, because it's mixing the authorization and token endpoint from two different spaces, right? So yes, if you're doing dynamic discovery, that'll do that. The pushback from having this be the mandatory way for the client to do this is that, one, it does require an extra round trip for the client to make this association. Two, it's hard to define it's hard to define the realm that the RS covers. Like, if I'm making this call at this path with a post and I'm doing a get to a different path, do I just go to the same AS? Do I use the same token? It's going to be API specific is what it amounts to. So we have a mechanism for when you do want it to be dynamic. In a lot of cases, though, it's going to be static. You're building a Facebook client, going to the OAuth world, you're building a Facebook client, you plug in, here's Facebook's Graph API, here's Facebook's AS. You build that in. And OpenID Connect, it's metadata, server metadata discovery thing. It's just kind of baked in. Here's your token endpoint. Here's your user info endpoint. They're knit together. So there's a lot of secure and manual ways to do it. GNAP has a secure automated way to do it, which does avoid this entire problem. So
it's dear to my heart, because folks I work with, a lot of them really love the ACE hint idea.
Yes.
And a lot of them say, no, don't make me process a hint. I already know where the AS is. Don't make me mandatorily must look at the hint and then go, oh, there's the AS over there. I thought it was over here. So there's a big debate there. So.
Yeah, no, that is pretty much the same feedback that we've gotten in this space. Thanks.
Hi, Roman, Carnegie Mellon University, kind of no hat. And so in listening to kind of this back and forth and how we potentially might mitigate this, correct me if I'm maybe perhaps misunderstanding. So there's some optional stuff that we don't want to do because it's more round trips that would mitigate this. But if we gave some guidance to the implementers kind of the API that are building on top of this, they could do more things?
Yeah, so the guidance would be basically in documentation or discovery or however people find out about how to connect to your service, which would, one of the options would possibly be the optional www authenticate response. Make sure there is a deterministic mapping to the proper AS, and then this whole problem goes away as best as I understand it.
So could we just document what you just said as the
Yeah.
security consideration and like call that error resolution to that?
That's
Okay.
kind of what I'm leaning towards. I haven't had a chance to talk this through with Fabian yet to clear it, but again, this was one of the last big remaining discussion areas that we had on the RS draft, so I wanted to make sure it was surfaced here, and we will we'll bring up all three of these on the list as we go through as well.
Okay, to me, having gone through formal analysis and found something is an indication that maybe we're missing something, like in principle, something deeper in the protocol. I would suggest that before we come up with guidance and all sorts of ways to wash over this issue, we should go back to the people who did the analysis and see if there are alternative solutions. So you disagree with the current proposal, that's fine. Let's see if there are alternatives that do not involve the implementers, reading guidance.
Yeah, I agree. And if you go down through the thread, there's actually a fair amount of back and forth to that nature already in GitHub. So, all right. And yeah, and that's all I had. So Fabian and I think that we can get RS ready for working group last call ahead of 118. And as long as the chairs think that's doable, we might be able to actually put that through the process. Do you think we should have an interim ahead of that, or what do you think would be the best process here?
Yeah, and specifically for this issue.
I mean, running an interim and see if we can specifically get the guys
the
who reported
researchers.
this,
Yeah.
in on it.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah. Does it make sense to run this at the OAuth security workshop?
We could. That's coming up at the end of August.
It's soon.
Yeah.
It's very soon.
Very soon.
Yeah.
I will be in attendance at OSW.
I thought so, right?
Yeah, so
and I was wondering,
I can do it
you
on
could
conference section.
Well, if we can find out if they're going to be there.
Oh.
Because
Yeah,
if
that's a
they
good question.
are, right, then
Then we can just run it there.
Yeah.
Instead of an ITF session. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see. I don't
know if I can make it. Well, I don't know yet, but
So again, kind of Roman AD hat on kind of process. We would, of course, never use the OAuth kind of workshop as successful kind of as it is
No.
to substitute the standards kind of process
course.
kind of in the ITF
Of
or
course.
ITF drafts. Completely understand
in this case, it would be more
If
be
we were
like
in the same
authors
room.
getting together with somebody reporting an issue to have a discussion, right? No
Absolutely.
more than that.
We're on the same page.
Yep, yep.
For the record. And again, I think it goes kind of without saying, kudos to the folks kind of at Stuttgart for this really kind of amazing kind of formal analysis they brought to the ITF. So kind of thank you if you're online or for the
Yeah,
record.
we'll go on record saying thank you many, many times, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And they really deserve like high bandwidth.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I would love to sit down with those sequence diagrams with them to make sure I'm not missing something in this stack. If you read through the thread, you'll see that their initial model was a little bit off. from the assumptions that they were making. And so that's, some clarification we need to make in the RS draft to say, like, this is a property we expect versus don't expect, that kind of thing. But yeah, if the researchers are going to be at OSW, which I'm not sure if we have the name of that specific researcher apart from their GitHub profile, but I will check into that, and I'll check with Daniel Fett about who's attending OSW. So, okay,
All right.
all right, thank you.
Very much.
That gets us to the end of the agenda and AOB. So in the interest of time, I'll give you 5 seconds to run to the mic if you have something to say. Yeah, thought so. All right, now we can all go over to OAuth and play tourist. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Where is OAuth?
If you're going to go to OAuth, it's in Golden Gate 7.8.